let's kick off our seminar here with our first speaker, is Rod Lane. And Rod has over 24 years of experience in the transportation industry. He began his work in New York City at the Department of Transportation there in 1990. And in 95, he made a smart move and moved to Arizona and began work as a consultant. In 2005, he began his career here at the Arizona Department of Transportation as a senior resident engineer in the Tucson district, and he's been here ever since. In January of 2013, he was promoted as the Tucson district engineer. Rod studied civil engineering and graduated from the University of Arizona and is a registered professional engineer here in the state. Without further ado, Rod, come on up. Get your PowerPoint going here.
I'm going to start off today talking to you about kind of where the Tucson district is and what we do and so on. Then we'll get into some current construction projects, what we've got going on now in the PAG region, and then we'll kind of look at what we've got in the 5-year plan and what we've got planned to even beyond that. Give you an idea about where we're going with transportation. Let me see if this thing works. So this is the Tucson district. This is all the area that I cover. We cover the maintenance, the operations, and the constructions of all the state highways in those areas. We start up, we've got 3 interstates. We've got I-10, I-8, I-8 and I-19. We go from I-10 all the way up from the Casablanca Road TI, which is just south of kind of the Gila River up there at 175.83. And we go all the way down to the Cochise County line. We go on I-8 all the way from the Pinal County line at 147.61 all the way to the intersection of I-10, and then of course we've got I-19. We've also got a large kind of rural component to our district. You know, out on the west side we go all the way out to Y and Ajo out there, and then in the northeast we go up into Mammoth and into portions of that more rural area up there. And we've also got 3 international border crossings. Of course, the Nogales one, the Sassabee one, and the one in Lukeville at the bottom of 85. And 5 councils of governments, MPOs. Of course, we've got PAG, which we're in now. We've got a little bit of SEGO, Southeast Arizona, down in Cochise County. We've got portions of CAG up in the northeast, a little tiny bit of MAG up in the Maricopa area, and then there's a new MPO formed in the Casa Grande area called the Sun Corridor MPO, and that was just kind of getting off the ground and getting moving. So you'll see a lot of that kind of stuff coming out of there. And we've got portions of 5 tribal nations in this district: the Tohono O'odham, the Pasco Yaqui, a little bit of the San Carlos Apache up in the northeast, the Gila River in the community in the northern part, and then the Ak-Chin over near Maricopa in there. So let's get into kind of what we've got for current construction going on now. The big job we've got going on in the district is 77 in Oro Valley. That's one of the larger ones we've got. Moving along very well. It's on schedule. Seems to be progressing along nicely. We met with the businesses last week and it went very well. There's challenges with every construction project, but we're navigating through. So we'll move that along. The contractor is doing very well. SR 86 out kind of on the Tohono O'odham out there. That one's moving along. It's actually done. We're just waiting to put in some wildlife fencing to control the wildlife that we've to go through the wildlife crossings that were constructed as that project is part of the PAG program. We're doing a widening of the Valencia I-19 off-ramp down in on I-19. It's moving right along with Ashton. A little sign rehab job on SR 210 or the Brazza Aviation, and we're starting a pedestrian bridge over on San Javier Loop. You'll notice the E's and the M's off on the left over there, and I wanted to point that out to you. That's kind of how we do our financing. So the E stands for expansion, the M stands for modernization, and then you're going to see another one coming up later, which is a P, and it's going to be blue, and that stands for preservation. So that's kind of how we put our money. Typically, we try to do about, in a statewide basis, about 75% of our money goes to modernization and preservation, where only 25% of it goes to expansion. And one of the interesting things you're going to kind of notice in this slide is you'll see that the PAG region right here has a lot of green and a lot of yellow. When we get to other slides, you'll only see that green and yellow in the PAG. You won't see any very little green and yellow outside of PAG, because PAG is a dedicated funding source. So they get a lot more money for expansion than the more rural areas. So let's move on to what what we've got in the 5-year plan. The first one out of the gate is going to be I-19 Ajo TI. That's going to be coming out this year. The end of this, probably around, we'll advertise it probably in June-ish. So that's going to be a 2-phase project. We're going to start phase 1 this year. Then we're going to do quite a bit of work down in the Davidson Canyon area. You can kind of see it kind of on the eastern side of I-10 there. We've got several expansion projects and preservation projects, some pedestrian enhancements and some frontage roads projects on I-19. More work on in the town of Sells with a Hawk going way out there, and some more pavement prez back on I-10. And that was year 15. This is 15 outside the district, and you can see how kind of the workload is thinning a little bit out there, where we've just got modernization and preservation with some intersection improvements, some pedestrian work, and some pavement preservation projects where we go in and we mill off the top a couple of inches of asphalt and then put new asphalt down to rejuvenate the whole thing. Year 16, within the PAG region, a couple of more big expansion projects. We've got the Ina Road TI is going to be starting at that year, so you'll see a lot of work out there. Again, that's just the first phase of that project. So we've got Ajo starting the year before, Ina starting the year after, and then you'll see the next big TI coming up is going to be Ruth Rock. We'll get to that in a minute. SR 86, some more widening going on out there, and then a couple more modernization projects going up down on I-19 with the Pima Mine Road and the Santa Cruz River Bridge, where we update those bridge decks out there. That's going to be a bit of a challenge because they're so close to each other. The road is narrow down there. So the question is, how do you replace a bridge deck and maintain the traffic on I-10? So we've got some pretty inventive solutions out there that's going to be pretty interesting when that comes out. 2016, outside the PAG region, it thins out again. We've got just 2 projects coming in there, a culvert extension and a pavement preservation project. In 17, within the PAG region is going to be the start of phase 2 of Ina Road. So the reason we're doing it in a phase 1 and a phase 2 is more of a funding source. There's 2 main pots of money in this. One comes from PAG and the RTA, and one comes from the state. So how those are budgeted is how we're going to be phasing this project, and how we have to spend those things within certain guidelines, within certain time frames. So we'll be starting phase 2 of Ina Road in 17. Outside the district, or outside the PAG, again in 17 is strictly preservation projects. So I know there's 3 Ps and only 2 on the left. One of them is one project. Half the project is north and half the project is south, or just rest areas. 18 in the PAG region comes our next big TI, which is Ruthroff. So we've got Ajo first year, Ina, then Ruthroff. Ruthroff won't be started until Ina is done. So one of the commitments we've made is we're not going to have 2 TIs locked up kind of like that, because you have to close them to replace them. So that won't be happening. Then we have more work on 86 in Fresno. The second phase of Ajo is starting that year, and some more pavement preservation project out on 86. There we go. Outside, again, more pavement preservation projects out in the rural areas. Skip right to the last year 17. The second phase of Ina is starting that year. That's the only project we have in that year that's starting. So it is a big one, but it's the only one that we've got going. We'll be pretty busy with all the other work going on. Typically the TIs take about 2 years. So we'll still have a lot of work. 17, outside, strictly preservation projects. 19, Houghton Road. This is the last year. That's just kind of coming in on that one. We're just getting going on that TI. This is the last year of the 5-year plan. So that just came in this year, and we'll be starting to see that. So let's now talk about the 10-year plan. And I put things both inside and outside PAG for the 10-year plan, because it's, let me just see. You can see that the 10-year plan is a lot less, the financial commitment is not there. It's a lot less committed. So in the 5-year plan, you've got, pretty much a plan to spend the money. This is how we're going to do it. The 10-year plan is, if we figure out how to get the money, this is how we're going to spend it. So in 20, 22, 23, 24, we've got a bunch of TI work planned for I-10 for the south part. Country Club, Keno, Irvington, Valencia is all going to start going on in that year. Outside the 10-year plan, or outside PAG, are where I'm seeing the big projects. The first big one's coming up is the 347 overpass in Maricopa, city of Maricopa. We're looking to do that one in 20. The 189 project down from the Mariposa Port of Entry. that was just expanded and just opened last year. That's going to be a big job. That's going to go all the way from the port of entry to B19. That's quite an important project for the entire state. And then there's the last two portions of I-10 that are within the district that have to be widened. That's the one at in the town of Picacho and the one in the junction of I-8. So those are in the 22 and 23 years. So now we'll start looking at long-range studies. One of the studies we have out there is I-10. It's going all the way from I-19 to SR-90. So it's got kind of an urban component and a rural component. This is a study where we expect to see all of those, how we're going to actually build all of those TIs, the phasing of all of those TIs that we just talked about in 2021, 22, and 23. There's a couple of very interesting components in this one, is that it's also looking at tying in SR-210 to I-10. SR-210 is Barraza Aviation. So we're looking at options to bring that into I-10 on the east side of town. So we'll see some very inventive ideas coming out of that. You'll start to see some results of that study over the next year or so in public meetings and such. So it's quite a interesting thing. We've got another study going on in Marana right now for the Marana TI. Working with the town on that. They've got some plans. We want to make sure everybody's in sync with that so that their expectations are the same as ours, and we're working together. A new study that kicked off is an I-19 study all the way from I-10 to the international border. This one's kind of unique in the fact that it's not really a study to say how are we going to design design this future corridor. It's more of a study to look at how do we set up measuring devices to check the status and the pulse of the corridor, and what do we use to measure those things to see how we're doing as a roadway. So this is actually a program that's going to be started all over the state for various corridors like this, and this is one of the ones that it's kicking off with. So it's kind of interesting. And the last one I'm going to talk about is the I-9 or the 189 study, which we've told you about it being in the plan, but this is actually finishing the study and where we're going. So we just had a meeting last week, or excuse me, 2 days ago, on this one down in Nogales. It's a very hot topic down there. It's going all the way from the border all the way to B19, and we've got a managed corridor is what we're doing. So we're basically taking the existing roadway and keeping everything on the existing roadway and just updating the traffic interchanges and such to increase the flow. So that's where we are. Does anybody have any questions?
Can you expand a little bit on the Ina Road project that's going to be going on in the next couple of weeks?
Well, it's going to be a new traffic interchange. So the traffic interchange is going to switch from what it is now. So the interstate, or the Ina Road is going to go over the interstate. So it's going to be just like all the other ones that we have, just like Prince, all the other ones. So it'll start next year. We've already got a contractor on there. It's a CM at risk. The contractor is a joint venture from Sunt Kiewit. So we are moving forward with the plans, and it's progressing nicely.
Are you actually lowering I-10 at Ina?
Yeah, we'll have to. Yeah, because the Ina Road is going to go over it. So right now, the freeway goes over that. So it'll be switched. That's why you have to shut it all down, because you have to switch the whole thing.
You haven't made any mention of the I-11 corridor.
Okay.
Is that just kind of off the charts for the next 10 years?
Well, the I-11 corridor is in the early planning stages to go through. So right now you're looking at it from a 30, 40, 50,000 foot level. It's way, way high. So we've had all our meetings. The challenge is coming up with funding, how we're going to implement it, where it's going. We haven't even actually decided where it is. You've got a 50-mile corridor that you've looked at right now. Where in that section is it going to go? Everybody's got their opinions and their thoughts about where it's going to go. So that's kind of the next step of where we're heading with that. Bring it down one more level.
Can you share a little more information on how far you are in the process with the plan at Marana?
Well, we're working with the town on it to make sure that they've got their kind of long-range plans and what they want to do and how they want the geometry to work. So that's one of the things that we're trying to get in sync on, that our thing will work with what they want. So once we get that, you're dead on. How do we build it? Where does the money come from and such? And that's going to be kind of a regional decision. And that's what we do with all of the traffic interchanges. When are they needed? When will they come? and the whole region looks at it through PAG, and we determine, okay, this is where it's gonna come. ADOT can certainly, you know, do it. It is a state highway, but it's more of a regional function. We'll all sit down and say, okay, do we wanna do this one first, do we wanna do that one first, and we'll determine as a group how it moves forward. And also the funding.
You kind of jumped over that I-11, would you just expand a little bit for investment people who aren't really familiar with what is the concept, rationale for I-11, what are the benefits?
Well, I can give you what I know about it. Basically, the concept is between Las Vegas and Phoenix, there is, it's one of the few, if not the only, two major cities in the country that don't have a connecting interstate. So the goal is to try to connect those two cities with an interstate and those two regions with an interstate. That's the corridor of I-11. We've kind of extended it all the way down to the Nogales area, and that's actually where we want to go. With the Intermountain West corridor is what the portion that's not called I-11 is the Intermountain West. And the reason I-11 goes from Phoenix to Tucson is because that was congressionally designated as I-11. So the parts beyond that are not I-11. That's why they're called the Intermountain West corridor. So right now, we've been talking about taking it all the way from Phoenix. We just take it as an ADOT up to the Nevada border, and they want to take it all the way up to their state line in the north as well. There's a large, large economic advantage to having that interstate there. It ties into 189. There's a lot of manufacturing and produce that come through that area to go all the way through the country. Ties into Phoenix and rail and Tucson rail and everything. So it's a pretty significant thing.